Good evening, everybody. Welcome into the Villanova Basketball Report, and it is time for March Madness. Well, the NCAA tournament, guys, is just a week away as we sit here on Tuesday. The beginning round, the first four in Dayton, will take place starting on Tuesday night of next week. Truly unbelievable to think about, guys, as we started this show, it seemed like just a couple weeks ago, went through a lot of ups and downs throughout the college basketball season, Villanova in particular, but now they find themselves back up at number 2 in the AP going into the Big East tournament, and just in a few minutes, we'll go through that bracket, but I think it's a decent time to step back and reflect, because it has been one of those seasons where anybody on the outside would think what a phenomenal season it has been. And another season where every single week they were ranked in the top 5. Again, they've done that 17 weeks in a row. The only week this season where they weren't ranked in the top 5 was the very first poll, where they were number 6. So, break that down. And what were your key takeaways and have been your key takeaways this year? Kevin Long, fresh off a red eye from California. We start with you.
Thanks for having me on short notice here, Bob. But, great season for Villanova. I think it's easy for fans to be let down by the last few weeks and not remember how this team started off hot, setting records from the get-go. You think of some of the great teams, 2016, obviously national champions, 2009 Final Four appearance, and this team really played head and shoulders above the rest for the entirety of the season from start to finish. So, really great year for Villanova. Didn't end up with a Big East championship, unfortunately, just due to the way that, they lost a lot of their games in conference, but they dominated their out-of-conference schedule. You had some tough teams, Gonzaga in there, played very well against them. So definitely an overall good season for the Villanova Wildcats. Easy to get bogged down in the last 3 weeks here. We've had our, 3 of our losses here jumbled up at the end here. So, don't forget about how successful this team is. We've dominated Xavier in both meetings that we've had with them, so I feel pretty confident if we see them again in the Big East Championship. And this team still matches up with any other team in the country. So I'm looking forward to March Madness coming up here for the Cats.
Yeah, definitely really positive moving into the best part of the season, where it all matters most, tournament time. Very positive outlook, I think. As a Villanova fan following the Cats, there was a stretch in there, that I know people will point to where the Cats were 3 of 6 at one point between losses against St. John's, Providence, and Creighton down the stretch. But I think if you think about the injuries that they battled through this year, a lot of new faces, a lot of players in new leadership roles. And I think, recently, in recent weeks, their offense, which had been, as Kevin alluded to, shattering records, had been an offense nobody had seen since 2015 Wisconsin. One of the best offenses in the efficiency-wise in the Ken Pom era. Struggle in the past few weeks. What I think is even more important is a positive, and that's been the defense. The defense has gotten a lot better. I think part of that is having Phil Booth back, having the full rotation of guys, staying fresh bodies in there, and they're just starting, like I said, also a lot of new faces this year, a lot of guys in new leadership roles, and I think they're really starting to gel as a defense, and as we know, that is what Jay Wright and his staff always pride themselves on as a program. First and foremost is the defensive end, and they've shown great growth over the past few weeks. Huge positive, very exciting, I think, going into March.
This is the Villanova Basketball Report. Bob Long, Tom Trainer, Kevin Long, your team here all year long on VBR, as we like to call it, in just a phenomenal way as we now move forward into the NCAA tournament to take a quick look back and take a look at where things may be. Now, another fun thing we're going to get to tonight, and we've talked about it at times on this show and, of course, throughout the history of BLS, and that is the concept of clutch and, whether this Villanova team will fall into that category or not. Specifically, we're going to evaluate free throws, and it all spurned from a conversation after the Seton Hall game, maybe in the midst of the Seton Hall game, as Villanova struggled to put it away. 2 free throws in particular that I think, Tom, you had sort of taken a look at it and said, those were big free throws. If they would have gone down, Villanova, 1, could have won in regulation, or 2, could have put it away in overtime more quickly. And we can talk a little bit about the Seton Hall game as well. So it got me to thinking, where and what would be the best way to truly evaluate that on a larger sample size. But we'll tease that for about 5 minutes down the road. Starting with that Seton Hall game, Villanova, I thought it was the first time in a couple weeks where they were clearly intent upon getting inside. They were giving up open three-point basket opportunities, giving open looks on the perimeter up to either pass the ball to a cutter or, more often than not, driving in the form of Eric Paschal, Mikal Bridges, and Jalen Brunson. Tom, I think you even made the comment, is Jalen even allowed to shoot threes? And maybe it was a little bit of overkill, but I actually very much appreciated that style of basketball. I think it's unfortunate that they did not shoot very well. I think a part of that could have been that there was a concerted effort to get different types of looks. It took them a little bit out of rhythm. But in order to win in March, that's how I think they can do it, not by shooting over the top of Xavier and being so fortunate to hit them, of course, because of the talented players. But at some point, like in that Xavier game second half, that will go cold. And I think you've seen a concerted effort over the last 2 games, even though the offense hasn't been as efficient as it has been this year, a concerted effort to get back to getting the ball inside.
Well, and I think that I said, just want to correct myself, that Jalen wasn't allowed to shoot the ball at all, not necessarily threes.
Okay, yeah,
which is interesting because there was a time in that game, so he was cold in the first half. He wasn't shooting well. He really turned it on late in the game when they needed him most, which is great. That's where you want to see your best player, in my opinion, the best player in college basketball, step up, take the game over, win the game before you put the team on your shoulders type of thing. But he was cold in the first half, and then it seemed in the middle part of the game there were times where he, as always, established himself inside the lane, inside the paint, had open jump shots either from the elbow or a turnaround closer into the basket that he normally takes, and for whatever reason was passing up those looks and seemed tentative. And Jay and his Villanova program, they always pride themselves almost to a fault, as many fans will say, about never backing down from a shot, or never, there is no such thing in the Villanova program as a bad shot. Even if you're having an off night, you keep putting them up, right? And for one of the rare times, I thought it was interesting to see our best player, one of the best players ever in Villanova history, passing up looks, a little tentative, deferring, and a guy who I've never known to lack confidence. And so that's when I had sent you that message, wondering, what's going on. He's getting open looks.
Do you think he was lacking confidence, or was it just a change in the game plan and they're trying to work some different things in there?
Well, what
it's tough to say.
And what we've seen recently in their past few games where they've struggled, part of the reason isn't necessarily Villanova struggling, but other teams doing a really, really good job of taking the ball out of his hands and really pressuring Jalen and making other guys beat them. So, it started with St. John's, who has always been a really good defensive team. I mean, St. John's games, as long as I can remember, have always been ugly. For the most part, they're always ugly games. The Seton Hall game was an ugly game, and that's because teams did a great job of, not biting on, those patented Villanova shot fakes, keeping Dante, Jalen, Mikal in front of them, but really frustrating Jalen. And I think we're seeing teams key in on him specifically, taking the ball out of his hands. He had probably the most turnovers in his life at Providence, and I think that's something. So to give other teams credit is what I'm saying, that they've been keying in on him, frustrating. I mean, he's still been, able to get 20 or 30 points regardless, but I think we're seeing teams frustrate him a little bit, to their credit. And I don't know, I don't doubt he was lacking confidence. I think it was maybe a more strategic decision. Hey, this isn't my time. Let's get other guys the ball. Type of thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was more of a team directive coming from Jay. I think Mikal Bridges really set the tone at the outset of that game. He was, he was just taking the ball to the rack real early in that game. He had been settling for a lot of threes in the past few games before that. I mean, he had been hitting a lot of shots. He was really hot for sure, but there was definitely a different tone that was set at the beginning of the game. And Jalen said it, and Mikhail said it. I think Mikhail started with the first 8 points in the entire game, and he was just taking the ball to the rack. He looked a little bit more like Eric Paschall instead of settling for that shot outside. Maybe pump fake, go in, and that's where he can really use his length to his advantage. So. I definitely want to see more of that from Mikhail moving forward. And I think it's something that we talked about recently, actually, about, not settling for threes, and you become so reliant on the three, and when you don't have it, then, you may have a game like a St. John's or something like that, and we can't have that, obviously, in March here. So it's good that we're trying to work the ball inside. Really, the only two guys that didn't seem to be on the same page were Dante and Phil. I mean, they're not as much of a take it to the rim kind of guy, but they can do it too. Absolutely. It just seemed like those two were still settling for some of those shots, and I would like to see them work the ball around a little bit more. And I mean, I like that the team feels comfortable taking any shot, and I think that helps them. If they think about, should I take this shot or should I not, they'll be more likely to miss, probably not playing as relaxed, thinking a little bit too much. But I would like to see those two guys work it a little bit more inside like the rest of the team has been doing.
And if I may, speaking to your point to Mikal Bridges and getting the ball inside, I think this past week in the Seton Hall game in particular was finally the Mikal Bridges we expected to see this year and had become accustomed to in non-conference play at the start of the season and early on in Big East play. But towards the beginning of the season, I mean, he was a force to be reckoned with on both sides of the court. And just, I mean, he was the big man. He was a man amongst boys for a large part. First half of the season, just owning games, and I think where it showed most was that Gonzaga game where he had guys afraid to put up shots, with him breathing down their necks. And I think, and Bob, you had mentioned, both on and off air that you'd like to see Mikal be more assertive, driving to the basket like he had been earlier in the year. Not just with the ball in his hands, but also more assertive in the Seton Hall game, hustling, defensive end. I mean, I can think of in particular 2 or 3 huge offensive rebounds, one especially that he got in the last few minutes of the game. He got an offensive rebound, kicked it out to Amari, and then Mikal got it right back on the baseline for a huge three-pointer. So it's just the hustle plays like that, and he really just took the game over, and that's the Mikal Bridges, we hope to see from here on out because they desperately need him for sure.
All right, let's talk about clutch. It's everybody's favorite topic here, and it's one that I think any way you slice it, you're going to find opinions across the spectrum about what is clutch. Is there such thing as choking versus being clutch? What is the definition of clutch? Is the definition of clutch to not let pressure affect you and perform at the same level as you would in a non-timely situation? Is clutch the ability to perform over and above what your expected performance would be in a given situation? And then how do you measure it? And at what point is it sample size versus truly clutch? And then how do you get into the mindset of these guys? All very difficult questions. It's the reason I think it's a great topic for a show like this. So during the Seton Hall game, with the 3 of us here, the hosts have a text chain. We were going back and forth about certain free throws and certain guys as to whether they have been clutch over the span of the year. And clutch being defined as, however you want to define it. So I took it upon myself to do a little study and figure out whether, in fact, Villanova was, let's just say, hitting less of a statistically significant, smaller portion of free throws in timely situations versus situations where maybe the game is not in doubt. So let's set the parameters here. The parameters are, and again, it's somewhat, we'll say arbitrary here, but I picked a game where Villanova, at the point at which the guy goes to the foul line, Villanova is leading by 7 or less points or is trailing with, let's say, 11 minutes or fewer to play in the second half. Those are the assumptions I went with for whatever reason. We can always tweak it later. It just felt like at that point, the game is kind of getting to the latter stages, right? The last quarter plus of the game. 7 points being it can really, if you miss a couple free throws, it can swing in a possession or two. So generally, those are timely situations. And so let's take a look.
And you said either leading or losing by 7 points?
Nope. Trailing at all.
Trailing.
Now they
Okay.
haven't trailed by less than 7 very often.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to
You mean more
For-
than 7? They haven't trailed by less than 7 very often, or
more,
than-
they
okay,
they have
okay.
not trailed by a significant number of points very much this season. If we wanted to re-examine the band, we could go back and do it. But here's what we have now, and this is not necessarily the clearest thing, but what I did, and there's a much larger expanded graph here, but total make to miss ratio in clutch situations. Jalen Brunson actually had 40 what we'll call timely attempts, made 35 of them. He's missed only 5 of them. That's a clutch percentage we're going with of 88%. Then I took their total free throws on the year minus that 35 over their total free throw attempts that year minus the 40 to figure out what his free throw percentage is in non-clutch opportunities. He was actually only shooting 76%. Omari Spellman with only 8 opportunities. Eric Paschal, 6 opportunities. Phil Booth, 9 opportunities. To some extent, we can kind of throw those out. But they're all in the mix. Paschal is well behind, but again, 4 out of 6 is 67%. 5 out of 6 is 83%. And through March the 1st, his free throw percentage was 84%. So it would have been right in the mix. That's well too small of a sample size. The one that's interesting is Dante DiVincenzo, who took 21 timely attempts, made 13 of them for a clutch percentage, quote unquote, of 62% versus 75% on the season. So, take home point here is as a team, actually, they're making more timely, quote unquote, timely free throws than they are in normal situations. So 75% adjusted free throw percentage when you take out those timely free throws versus 80 in those timely situations that we will call clutch. And you see on the left-hand side of the screen here, free throws are counted as clutch opportunities when they take place with under 11 minutes remaining or in overtime if Villanova leads by 7 or less points or is trailing. Now, the other thing you said, Tom, is that this Villanova team isn't hitting as many free throws as they have in the past, and that maybe just that general trend is affecting them in a way where they're missing more in the clutch situations. They're actually, as of tonight, 77% and 27th nationally after having a nice game against Georgetown. But as of March the 1st, 76.2, 4.7 percentage points behind number 1, William & Mary. And actually out of the last 5 years, this is square in the middle of the third best free throw shooting percentage of Villanova teams since they've been 2 seed, 1 seed, 1 seed, 2 seed, 1 seed, and now whatever they'll be this year. So I thought it was very, very interesting. And then when we begin to parse this even more, right, you look at these percentages and they're not making as many in non-clutch situations. So they have made the 86 free throw attempts in clutch situations out of 107 clutch attempts. In order, and this is from the bottom, in order for Villanova's clutch free throw percentage to hit its season percentage, assuming the same number of attempts, Villanova would have needed to have made between 81 and 82 free throws, as opposed to the 86 that they have made. So we need to make the decision of whether that 4% is a big enough outlier or difference to become statistically significant. My thought is no, that it's not really statistically significant. But if there's anybody that maybe had the opportunity to be considered clutch, quote unquote, it would actually be Jalen Brunson, who has taken a lot of free throws in those situations and has only missed 5, oddly enough.
It's interesting, and as I told you, I was curious to see what you had found, because just to give our listeners a little bit more background, the reason I had brought this up was because, and I think you would agree, there are some specific instances that stand out over the course of this season.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's one of the psychological traps you fall into, unfortunately everybody does, dwelling on the negatives, the occurrences. They're not thinking of the games where, they made their free throws like they're supposed to and put the game away. So I'm thinking of, at Butler when they had clawed back within, 3 or 2 points, and Jalen goes for the front end of a 1-and-1 after an and one.
You ready for this? That's the only game all year that he missed more than one free throw in a clutch situation.
Wow. So there you go.
He missed 2 in that game.
So that's, I believe he didn't capitalize on an and one, and then also missed the front end of 1-and-1. A similar scenario in St. John's game when they'd clawed back to cut it to 2. He could have cut it to 1, I believe, with Jalen at the free throw line, and he misses. And then, of course, the Creighton game, they would have won had Dante hit 2 of 2 from the line, and then the Seton Hall game the other night. So there are just a few instances, that, and, this is why I brought it up to Bob, where, they seem to just miss free throws at the most inopportune times. And I'm not saying they make those free throws, they win the games, but it's a huge difference at the time at which those free throws, were attempted in the game. They just mattered so much more in that particular situation, with a couple minutes or less than a minute to go in the game. They played a big difference.
And of course, right, there are other free throws where had they missed those, we might be having conversations about the same thing and saying, man, if they had just made that free throw, like that was a huge time to not make a free throw. But there were games where those free throws were made. They went on to win the game, and we don't remember them. One other thing to bring up as well. This is kind of an extension of what I did about on the same number of free throw attempts, what would they have needed to make? So remember, Jalen Brunson had attempted 40 free throws. He made 35. Now, in order for him to hit his otherwise season average, had he made 30 or 31, he would have ended up in that, whatever it was. It was 75, 76, right? So in between 30 or 31 free throws would have put him right at that season average. He made 35. So the difference is in between 4 or 5 free throws. Eric Paschal, 1. He missed 1 free throw. Had he made it, he would have been right on his season average. Bridges has a little bit more in terms of opportunities. His is between 1 and 2, and Dante DiVincenzo would have needed to have made 15 or 16 out of the 21 he's taken in order to match his season average. He only made 13. So that's 2 free throws on a sample size of 21 that wouldn't even qualify in terms of the law of large numbers at 30. So, again, when we go through these things, I wasn't sure where this study was going to come out. That's why I did it, put some time into it. And, I mean, those of you guys that know me, I mean, the Tommy John study, things like that. It's more just taking something that is either assumed to be true, assumed to be false, and digging deeper and getting those numbers. And I found that it was a very interesting study. I had a lot of fun with it. And the only thing I'll say, Tom, is I think you were really close to figuring out what the issue was. And here's what I think the issue is. Villanova actually is not hitting less free throws on average, on a percentage basis, I should say, than they are relative to prior years. However, they are shooting far less free throws than they have in prior years. So, while the percentage is just about as good, Villanova is still under 600 free throws taken this year. And I actually have this all written down here. So, they've only taken 551 free throws this year. That's 5 less games than they played last year when they took 681 attempts. The year before that, when they won the national championship, yes, they had 3 more games. They shot 766, but I still think that's enough to say that they weren't getting the same amount of free throws per game. Here's what's really interesting. 2014-2015, they shot only 73% and took 815 attempts. 2013-2014, they shot 72% and took 848 attempts. Looking a little bit deeper into it, this is actually driven by one Javon Pinkston, who went to the line 203 times in 2014 out of the 848 that they took. And in 2014-2015, he went to the line 188 times out of the 815 that they took. Now, Javon Pinkston was, on average, in between a 65 and a 70% free throw shooter. So you don't need to be a professional statistician to know that that is an outlier that's driving those results down. If you take him out of the equation, the 73 and the 72% from 2014 and 2015, as well as 2013-2014, lines them up with the 78% in 2015-2016, the 79% in 2016-2017, and the 77% in 2017-2018. So there you go.
That's a significant statistic. That's really interesting. And then what that means is, I mean, in late game situations, obviously then teams are looking to foul somebody like Javon, and you're looking to get the ball to somebody like Darren Hilliard or Arcidiacono.
Now, a lot of times Jay is running at that point offense, defense to get Javon off the floor. Frankly, I think the bigger thing there was he just attacked the basket as well as any, we'll call him big man, that we've seen at Villanova in a long time.
Oh,
and
that's why he
earned
shot more free
opportunities
throws. Yeah.
at the line.
That's why he shot more free throws, for sure.
So that's the study. Anybody have any thoughts or comments?
Well, I want to know what our listeners make of your study. I'm curious to see what they think. Had they noticed this trend or noticed what I had, thought of before, we brought this up this evening? And what do you take away, Kevin? Is there anything you take away?
I mean, the only thing that I would take away here is, yes, I agree that Bob's study doesn't show anything necessarily statistically significant as to whether or not Villanova is clutch or not clutch. A guy like Jalen Brunson, who's the team leader, steps up in the big situations like that a little more than a Dante DiVincenzo. I mean, that makes sense. I would want the ball in Jalen's hands rather than Dante at the end of the game. And I think there is something to be said for someone who is quote-unquote clutch. I know this is Bob's least favorite thing, but there's absolutely something to be said for someone who can silence all the noise around them when they're in the heat of the moment and can slow their breathing down, and they can hit a free throw when the game is on the line at the end of the game, or anything, really. I mean, from personal experience, you get to the seventh inning or the ninth inning, depending on, what type of game you're playing. Can you bear down and get those last 3 outs for yourself? Can you finish off a game? Can you calm the nerves to get those last 3 outs in the World Series or anything like that? There's absolutely something to be said for someone who has the mental toughness to slow down the game and just keep rolling like they were before. Because, I mean, you can see it with a guy like Dante every once in a while. He's all hyped up. He's breathing through his chest. He's not breathing through his stomach anymore. And there's something to be said for someone.
So is he gassed? Is it a fitness thing?
It's not a fitness thing.
It's a psychological thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a telltale sign as to whether someone is nervous or amped up. If they're breathing through their chest as opposed to their stomach, it's a huge difference. If it's their stomach, that's just what you do every day. You're calm. If you're breathing through your chest, you have quick, short breaths, and you're really not in the moment. You're sort of getting caught up in the moment, I should say. So there's absolutely something to be said for being clutch, and it goes beyond the numbers. It's your mental fortitude at the end of the day.
We do have a comment from the audience here. Mike Krause messages in and says, what it really seems like is Bob didn't do enough research.
I agree with you, Mike.
You're right.
I agree.
I did not consider the chest breathing.
Where was the psychoanalysis, Bob? Why didn't you, ask Jay if you could get these guys in high-stress situations, test their breathing, their blood pressure, and all that?
That was more of a pent-up argument to Bob's constant, there is no such thing as clutch.
Which and I wanted to get to that.
That had nothing to do with your study.
This is
can I ask,
those of you that have been.
What's the definition in your position there, Kev? Is your position that Dante DiVincenzo was not able to perform at the level that he normally does because in a number of free throws that isn't enough to qualify as a sample, a true sample size, that those 2 or 3 free throws? I mean, like, do you want him to shoot 80% or do you want him to just match what he does in the regular season? Like, what's your definition? Is it you need to perform at a level above what you normally do, or simply you're not letting your mental state affect you, so you're performing at your expected performance level?
Yeah, so first I would say, it's not anything against Dante DiVincenzo. I don't think this study necessarily proves that he's not clutch or he can't do it or anything like that. But I think, I mean, to say that you're clutch, you probably would have to do a little bit better in those scenarios. You're more locked into the situation, and your numbers are a little bit better at the end of the day.
You rise to the occasion. You outperform like
if you
Jalen Brunson
continue
has,
doing what you're doing, it's almost, I mean, it's hard to say that you're clutch. You may not just even realize
especially
how
if
big
you're
the
doing worse
situation
than
is.
what you typically do.
Well, yeah, then you're the opposite
Yeah.
of clutch, whatever that might be.
Choke.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, choke artist, absolutely. But I mean, to be considered clutch, you would have to be doing, more than what you normally do.
Okay, can I
being able
ask
to
a
keep
question
things
there?
simple. Yeah.
So why can't somebody focus at that level, at which point they're performing above their norm? Why can't they do that the entire time they're playing the athletic sport?
Why can't they do that the entire time? Why?
Right, so are you telling me that
I
there's
have an
that a
answer.
mentally weak person that
I
can't
have an
focus for 40 minutes, they just focus when the time is the biggest,
Well,
and that
no.
means they're
No.
clutch?
No, it's different for some people. If you're clutch, you don't let the moment get the best of you. If you're not clutch, the game moves faster than you do, and you're thinking too much, and you're thinking about the moment, and you're forgetting about the fundamentals of whatever it is you're doing, and everything just is racing by you.
I get
and-
the choke. That's choke.
I understand. So answer your question.
Why can't you focus at the level if you're performing at a high level in a timely situation? Why can't you just do that all the time? Why couldn't David Ortiz be as locked in as he was in the playoffs throughout the
Yeah.
regular season? Why was he not mentally tough
Sure.
to do that?
Well, Bob, I think it's a fight or flight instinct. It's the adrenaline going. It's the stakes of that moment. It's, I mean, the feeling. I mean, you're a competitor. You guys who's been involved in sports your entire life, and you're the type of guy that I would think, if we're out in your driveway playing 3-on-3 basketball, and it's 10-10, and next point wins to 11, you want the ball in your hands.
I do.
And why is that? Because
To
you're a
be
competitor. You rise to the occasion, and it's the adrenaline going. It's the whole idea. I mean, not to go this far, but it's the idea. The saying that a woman, if her child is trapped under a car, could theoretically lift the car. It's that idea of you're in this high pressure situation. There's some people that rise to the occasion. Your endorphins get going. That adrenaline. Psychologically, they're just. I mean, some guys. It's a guy like Jalen Brunson in that Seton Hall game who hadn't been having a great game, who might have been deferring to some other players. Because remember, in the whole course of a game is a chess match, right? It's like, let's go to football. It's like how you don't go for the Hail Mary on each play. You don't go for the big haymaker in boxing. You're setting it up. You go,
that's a
you go,
percentage play.
you go the little check down, but it's also psychologically. It's the chess match. It's a part of the game. So Jalen, you just can't physically possibly play at your peak 110% all-out level the entire game. But when your team needs you in the last 5 minutes of the game, and those instincts kick in, and you're the guy, and you've always been that guy your entire life, like a Jalen Brunson, then you rise to the occasion. You start being a little bit more selfish in a good way, looking for your shot, being aggressive. And I think it's just a whole psychological bag that, I'm not a psychologist, but I think all three of us here have played enough sports at a high enough level to know how important it is, the mental part of the game.
And these are high-level college athletes, and Jalen Brunson is the best player in college basketball in the first 35 minutes of the game, just like he is in the last 5. So, yeah, if somebody's going to step up in a key moment, it's going to be Jalen Brunson more often than not because he shoots a very high percentage. He takes a lot of shots, and he makes a lot of shots because he's a darn good player. And so when we see this and we see him hit these, it makes it seem as if he is clutch, quote unquote. He didn't look particularly clutch against Providence. He didn't look particularly clutch against Creighton. And that's just a game of numbers because shots go in, shots don't go in. And Jalen's going to make more of them in those situations than the next guy because he's taking more and he's better than most.
But you don't think there are players that rise to the occasion better than others? You don't think that's a thing?
I think as you get higher and higher across athletics, the difference is much, much less. So if you go to a high school basketball game, yes, I think there's a bigger difference, a bigger standard deviation in those timely situations because those players have not developed that mental capacity yet. I also think that experience has a factor as you go further and further in your career.
Definitely.
You become more and more used to those situations. And I just think when you get to a professional athlete or a high college athlete, that should not affect you, period.
Should not, but it still does. It still can. We see it happen, in the highest level of sports. We've seen, athletes screw up in the World Series. We've seen athletes
but they
screw
make
up in the
errors in the
Olympics.
regular season.
Right, but there's still moments where a guy will have a routine ground ball, or an athlete will false start or something, and that's psychologically the jitters getting the best of you. And there's some times where you can perform as in your entire life you've performed really well on the biggest stage, but just something happens. I don't know. You're telling me that there is no psychological factor at all.
So
sports psychologists
at
the highest level.
Didn't say that. What I'm saying is when you see something happen and we take a one-off situation and say that was not clutch, or that guy is clutch, or that guy is a choker, I think in the vast majority of cases, it can be explained by either a small sample size and a rush to judgment, unless you come to me and show me numbers in a big enough sample size and can explain, say, a reason why. So, like, for example, two of the best examples I always go to, Joe Flacco and golfers, right? Joe Flacco comes into the league, wins a playoff game each of the first 5 years that he's there. Why did he do that? Because he's clutch. No, because he had, one, a great defense, and two, he's got some of the biggest hands of any quarterback in the NFL. So he throws the ball well and has less impact on his performance in those games than others. What is the constant about playoff games? They are taking place in January and February in the coldest months of the season, and thereby it's an attribute that he has that gives him a better opportunity to succeed than somebody else. Now, I think that provides a little bit more to chew on than saying Joe Flacco is clutch. So that's example one. Example two is golf. People say that Dustin Johnson is a choker and that Jordan Spieth is clutch. Jordan Spieth also happens to be maybe the best putter in golf. So I'm going to throw this out there. Over time, I have noticed that people that are great putters are considered clutch. People that are not great putters are considered chokers. Sergio Garcia, wonderful ball striker, misses putts all the time, even on Thursday when you're not watching Golf Channel. But when he misses a big putt at Augusta, you say that he choked. Lee Westwood, great ball striker, not a good putter, has put himself in contention for majors. Then they put pins in tough spots on Sunday, tougher spots than they will at all earlier in the weekend. That is a differentiator between him and Jordan Spieth, who can make those putts, and Lee Westwood has not. Dustin Johnson, same concept. Jordan Spieth hit a terrible shot at Augusta that blew his chance to win, and he blew it to Danny Willett. He hit a ball onto the driving range 2 years ago, last year at the Open Championship, but was able to salvage it. Why? Because he can putt. So Jordan Spieth is not clutch. Dustin Johnson is not a choker. Jordan Spieth is a good putter, and we think good putters are clutch. And we think that bad putters are chokers.
I don't know how I feel about the examples. Can't say that I ever felt like Joe Flacco was clutch or even sniffing elite, as he claims.
Well, I didn't say elite.
That was a narrative.
Here, let me throw an example for you.
Let's hear it.
Madison Bumgarner. He's my example. Think about the 2015 World Series.
Yep.
Against the Kansas City Royals. So
he's also one of the best pitchers in baseball, by the way, even during the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his regular season numbers, they're not stellar. They're not his playoff numbers or anywhere near them.
Small sample size, remember.
Small sample size.
He also really struggled against the Cubs and got launched off by Jake Arrieta.
Right. That was 2 years ago. How about in the World Series, when he comes back, he pitches game one, wins, pitches Game 5, I believe, wins. Comes back in Game 7.
Gives 5 innings.
On about a day of rest. Yeah, he gives 5 innings of scoreless baseball. Comes back, and the Giants win the World Series. I mean, that just doesn't ever happen.
Now,
no pitchers.
Can I offer a thought there? He provides, when the guys out west see him, they see him 5-6 times a year because they play 6 series a year against each of the respective
By the way, Siri thinks you just said Siri.
There you go. Nice. He plays a lot against the NL West opponents, right? And so he has one of the most deceptive deliveries to the plate of any pitcher in baseball. So when he's playing an American League team or he's playing the Pittsburgh Pirates, 1, he's a fantastic pitcher, and 2, he is tough to adjust to if you don't see him very often. Now, what you might say is by the time the Royals are seeing him for the 3rd time in the World Series, maybe they should figure it out. Yes, but I'd also argue with his strength and durability and toughness and background, he is just equipped to go out and give you innings on short rest better than any other pitcher. Does that make him clutch? He could do that in August, too, if you wanted him to. And he would perform better than Aaron Nola, for example, right? And so the other pitcher I always think about is Cliff Lee. Cliff Lee had a 7-0 record and a 1-something ERA in his first 3 or 4 times through the playoffs. Then the next time through, he lost. He went like 0-3, had a 7-something ERA. So is he clutch, or did he catch lightning in a bottle, happen to come during playoff runs in a couple seasons in a row? Ian Poulter, Ryder Cup, happened to start playing well on a 3-day stretch for 3 or 4 weekends in a row on a 2-year stretch, right? Every 2 years, and he happened to play well on that weekend. The last couple years, goes to the Ryder Cup, didn't have the same form, stunk it up. Ian Poulter is not a clutch Ryder Cup performer. Cliff Lee is not necessarily a purely clutch baseball postseason pitcher. I think anytime you start pulling the sheets off this a little bit, there's almost always more to it.
I totally disagree with that. You were just saying how they happen to rise to the challenge in these random occasions, and you just used Ian Poulter as an example that he rose to the occasion in these big tournaments.
He happened to be playing well at the time.
Isn't that clutch?
Not necessarily. If he won a PGA Tour event 2 weeks before the Ryder Cup and happened to be playing his best golf, goes into the Ryder Cup and plays well, I would not. No, I really wouldn't.
I see what you're saying there. I wanted to ask, and we are getting way off topic.
Yeah, but it's fun.
Definitely need to move on.
But it's fun.
But I did want to say, speaking of studies, I would like to see a study, because something tells me there's a big difference psychologically between stepping up and hitting a drive or hitting an approach shot versus the finality of making this specific putt that is for a birdie or a par. Now, I know you're going to tell me, Tom, but every shot in golf counts the same. A stroke is a stroke.
No, I'm
right?
not going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you that some people are better putters than others.
But you don't think that Dustin Johnson, I mean, you were talking about, so we get to an elite level, the difference is minuscule. How much more do you think Jordan Spieth practice? He might practice this much more than Dustin Johnson, than Sergio Garcia on putting. You don't think those guys have very similar practice routines? They're all around each other all the time. They have similar, coaches.
Jordan Spieth is a better putter.
But why do you think that is? He just is?
He just is. I mean, why is Tiger Woods the best putter of all time?
Well, and Tiger Woods, there you go. There's an example of clutch. He was the prime example of clutch in athletics for years.
He never won a major when he did not have a 54-hole lead. Not once. So where is rising to the equation?
But isn't part of clutch the ability to hang on when the field is charging?
There's also a lot of times where the field is never charging.
Clutch isn't just all of a sudden making that move or catching people from behind or coming up huge at the end. It's, in that pressure. And I would say there's so much more pressure on you when you have the 54-hole lead than when you're the hunter. It's so much easier to be the hunter, be the guy who's sitting in second, third, fourth place a few strokes back than to be the guy sitting in the clubhouse Saturday night with the lead and having to sleep through the night thinking about, wow, I have this lead. I don't want to blow it at Augusta or at St. Andrews or wherever it is the next day in front of the entire golfing world. I think that's more clutch than hunting somebody down. So I think that it actually, in some ways, fits even more into the definition of clutch, is not succumbing to the pressure of everybody chasing you and hunting you and you fending them off. But back to the study.
Real quick
Okay,
on Tiger.
sure.
Let's do a study for next week's show or whenever we start our golf show, saying how many strokes he led by after 54 holes in each of those tournaments. Because you know full well that he won 3 or 4 majors by big digits. And we're also going to look at his average score on Sunday relative to, say, Saturday, Friday, and Thursday in every one of those wins. And the loss against Y.E. Yang. We'll include that as well.
You should compare that to other players' scores on Sunday
no doubt,
as well.
No doubt.
And also keep in
against
mind
the average score of the field.
Because keep in mind that Sunday is always the most difficult pin placement.
No doubt, of course. And that's same thing about Sergio and Dustin and those players that aren't quite as good at putters, missing some of those putts on Sunday versus another day. Now, another thing we'll have to obviously keep in mind is maybe we'll only take the average score, if we can, of those that had eventually made the cut.
Okay.
As opposed to pulling 140 and then 70.
Definitely. That'd be great. And back to the study I was going to suggest real quick was I don't disagree Jordan Spieth is the best putter in the world. I'm not disagreeing with you there. My question was, and I do want to get to some of Mike's comments as well. My question is, my research question would be, is there something psychologically about a putt versus another stroke in golf that similar to a free throw in basketball or pitching, where there's this, more of a still setting, the finality of I make this putt and I get a birdie, I miss, it's a par, I miss it by 4 feet, it could turn into a bogey type of thing, than just hitting an approach shot. Okay, I want to land it in this area of the green, or a tee shot. I want to get it onto this section of the fairway. Is there something psychologically different? I don't know if there are any studies out there that would have studied this, and similar. You could do a similar study about basketball. The psychology of when you're fluid, active in a game, and you're going to hit like a big 3-year drive to the basket versus I have to hit these 2 big free throws right here, standing still. And similar in football, you could say a kicker or a penalty kick in soccer. Different psychological. Of the finality of a specific moment where you are still and not in the fluid action of the sport.
Right, and my thought is this is sort of going back to what I was saying about slowing down your mind, slowing everything down. This isn't like a run play up the middle or, driving to the basket in basketball or hitting a tee shot in golf. This is something that is a very slow motion. You've been moving quickly all day. You need to slow yourself down in order to hit that big shot or make that big putt. And I think the misconception here is I'm not necessarily saying that people are clutch. I don't think that because, Madison Bumgarner went out and, pitched 5 scoreless innings in Game 7 of the World Series makes him, perennially, clutch is the word I was looking for. Saying
Kev, let's not defeat yourself here.
I'm not.
Isn't
defeating
that
myself.
the argument we're making, that certain people do rise to the occasion better than others, so certain people are clutch?
Sure. Some people are more clutch than others, but I'm not gonna sit here and say that Jalen Brunson is forever clutch, and if he gets a free throw, he gets 2 free throws with no time remaining and they're down by 1 in the NCAA championship, we're absolutely going to win. I mean, that just doesn't exist. If you're going to look for a study like that, it obviously doesn't exist. I just think people are more clutch than others. Some people have the mental fortitude to be able to slow their body down and make those short putts or free throws or penalty shots or whatever, kicks. I just think some people are better at doing that, and in that sense, 100%. They are clutch. Doesn't mean that they are 100% of the time going to do it.
No, and of course not, right? Look at the study. However, I think my point is that of the guys you're talking about that are more likely to slow themselves down, as you're saying, and be successful in those situations, those also happen to be the people that are better and more efficient in every other situation of that sport, right? So if you're telling me, Michael Jordan, one, missed a lot of game-winning shots, of course, right? But two, why was he considered the most clutch player in the game? Because he was by far the best player in the game. And you wanted the ball in his hands at the end of the game because he was the best player in the game with 10 minutes left in the first quarter.
And he said as much himself that the reason he succeeded so much is because he was willing to fail as often as he did. So just speaking to, he's remembered as being clutch because he made so many game-winning shots while he missed just as many, if not more, potential game-winning shots.
I mean, maybe we don't know who clutch is, or who
we need
clutch.
studies like this. We need to
studies like
benchmark
this.
their performance.
Yeah.
Find something with a sample size above and beyond what can be considered statistically significant, and then see where that average performance came in.
You're probably going to find random guys like a Connor Gillespie in the 2015 again Giants World Series who just came out of nowhere
in the
playoff.
Because you don't have enough sample size to determine with any significance that performance means that he is clutch, and that if the playoffs come around again, that he's the guy you want to hitch your wagon to at third base. I wouldn't, personally. I would not put him on the field. Maybe you would.
You might not have beaten the Royals.
Maybe not. No, hey, listen, that year, and he beat the Mets. He hit a huge 3-run home run. I'm not saying that they would have won the game without him. I'm saying if we have to do it all over again, I'm not using that performance to justify putting him on my team next time around.
All right. I hate to cut you guys off, but snow is coming, and don't want this show to run too long because the snow actually should be starting any minute now.
Well, last thing, because you said you wanted to get to some of Mike's comments.
Definitely.
He makes some interesting ones, and we'll address those and then roll. But he thinks golf's good to talk about because of the mental component. He thinks, and this is why I brought up what's the true definition. He thought that it was not allowing the pressure to affect you, and thereby clutch is being able to replicate your benchmark performance. Exceeding it, I don't know what he thinks about exceeding it. I don't know what he thinks that means. Like me, I think it's just, okay, focus better throughout the game. So, anyway, good thoughts from him, and then he wanted to talk about Yu Darvish in the past year's World Series. Small sample size would be my thought.
Great thought, Mike, but
there's no sample size big enough. You have to be clutch for
that
like an entire season, I guess, which then wouldn't be clutch. So I guess clutch doesn't exist.
No, you're
either always clutch or you're never clutch.
Not always, but that's what you're saying. Is he always not clutch? He was untimely.
I don't think it's measurable. It's just you just know
I think you would
just
have
know it.
I actually think you would have to do. I mean, I wasn't totally kidding when I mentioned like a psychoanalysis type of study where you are, putting people in high pressure situations and testing how, their heart rate and their blood pressure and their breathing is impacted and what's going on in their brain, like literally, the chemicals, what's going on in their brain and what parts of their brains are engaged and not engaged. I think that is a more accurate and robust study, which we don't have the means to do, although I'm sure there are psychologists that have done this. I'm positive.
But that should show itself out in the numbers.
But
it should over time.
Well, but I'm saying is I thought we were coming to the conclusion over time, sure, but I thought we were coming to the conclusion that a numbers-based study is never going to give you enough of a sample size to give you a
that's not true.
Answer.
That's not true.
I'm sorry. Well, I misunderstood that.
You absolutely can. It's just nobody's presented that to me at this point. I mean, you can do it. You can absolutely do it. You just need to define your parameters. You need to engage in certain assumptions. You have to understand the population, and then from there, just call the statistics. Right? So, like, you tell me that a closer is clutch, quote unquote, but when he goes in a tie game, he blows the game. why can't he be mentally strong enough? Why can't closers, and we have seen this be a trend, why can't closers go in there and focus the way they do in the ninth inning, in the eighth inning, or in a tie game? And I think those barriers are starting to be broken down. I think that is something that's changing about those roles. But no, there are absolutely ways to do this. I mean, Jalen Brunson is actually a decent example of a guy that you're over that 30 free throw sample size. Now we would have to do a confidence interval to see, with what confidence do we have that percentage he had could have been driven by randomness based on that number. That's how you determine whether something is clutch or not. And I thought that was interesting because he was the guy that this whole study began with on the other side of the fence, thinking that maybe he was not. And that's why we did this. So, no, there are absolutely ways to do it. It's a great discussion. Really, really, really is. And I have a lot of fun with it every time it comes up. So what else you guys got for me?
Well, what do we want to talk about? I mean, we've already touched on it. I think we can probably pass. I think we would all agree the defense has gotten better for the Cats recently. I mean, I guess I would move on to, what do you think about, do we want to talk about the Big East tournament first?
Sure.
Do we want to talk about Kevin's victory? What do we want to get into?
What do you got?
Talk a little bit about the Big East.
We
hardly
come
touched on Villanova basketball here on the Villanova Basketball Report. So
I tell you what, man, we touched a lot on Villanova basketball. That's a huge, huge topic that I think people are a little bit more informed on. However they come up with an opinion, they have learned something from this. So I would not poo-poo that discussion. But here's a look at the bracket. First round will start tomorrow. Marquette and DePaul, the winner will take on Villanova. The 8-9 game is Georgetown-St. John's. We already saw how being in your backyard at Madison Square Garden can impact. Rutgers, the 14 seed, goes all the way and gives Purdue all they can handle. They would take on Xavier. So let's talk about Villanova's road. It could be Marquette, a team that gave Villanova trouble twice. And then if they were so fortunate to win that game, it's the two teams that maybe play Villanova the toughest in the entire conference on a year-to-year basis, Seton Hall and Butler.
Yeah, Seton Hall is playing pretty well coming into this tournament. I was able to snag the 3 seed, as you see on your screen there. A lot of teams that were tied up there between 3 and 7, probably only about a game difference at the end of the day. I don't know what the final records came out to be. But I like the way they're playing. If they can get Desi Rodriguez back, that would be huge for them. Not sure what the timetable is on him as of right now. Looked like a pretty nasty injury the other week at Providence, maybe an ankle sprain or something. But if they're able to get him back, with Miles Powell and Angel Delgado, I think they have the depth to go far in this Big East tournament and potentially far into March Madness. I would obviously not necessarily like to see them go too far in the Big East tournament, but it could be a big statement for the Big East to show that it's more than a 2-horse race, and it would be nice to see them do well. I also, like you said, St. John's playing on their home court. They seem to have done pretty well. They have won a couple of big games here, including Duke and Villanova in the past month. I could certainly see them beating Georgetown and giving Xavier a run for their money on their own home floor. So it'd be interesting to see if St. John's can make a statement here and push their way through this bracket.
Yeah, I think you said it, Kev. Desi Rodriguez, a big factor for Seton Hall. I don't know what the injury update is at this point in time. That's a big thing, I think, to talk about, thinking back to last week. I mean, Seton Hall was without Desi Rodriguez, and that would be like Villanova being without Mikal Bridges, or something like that.
That is a good comparison.
So if we're talking about the defense, Villanova did play really well. They frustrated the heck out of Seton Hall, held them to just over 30% from the floor, 20% from three. But to be fair, again, think about what we would be saying to a team that was saying, oh, well, we shut down Villanova. If we didn't have Mikal Bridges, we'd be saying, well, we didn't have Mikal Bridges. What do you mean you shut us down? We were playing with one arm tied behind our back type of thing. So that's something to keep in mind that's scary about how, difficult and frustrating that game was against Seton Hall. Remember, they didn't have one of their best players. So keep that in mind. That's huge to see if he's back. And you were exactly right. I believe Creighton, Providence, and who would it be? Creighton, Providence, and Seton Hall tied at 10-8, and then Butler came in at 9-9. So you're exactly right. Those 4 teams separated by a game. For Villanova, you're happy to not see St. John's, as you mentioned, in the Garden on your side of the bracket. Marquette, they are a streaky team, man. I mean, that's the type of game where, Marquette isn't a team that's known for its defense, but they sure can fill it up. And if the Cats aren't shooting well on that night, watch out. So that's definitely a game. I think Cats are definitely the better team, and would expect them to win a game like that. Also, don't sleep on DePaul, who almost beat Xavier on Saturday and somehow would have but miraculously given Villanova its 5th straight regular season crown, but it wasn't meant to be. And Butler, of course, they've been our kryptonite the past 2 years to a certain extent. Keelan Martin specifically. So, but it's exciting. I can't wait. Big East tournament in the Garden. Hope to make it up to a game or 2 myself. It would be my first time up to the Big East tournament, which super excited for. Looking forward to that.
That's phenomenal. I did not know that would be your first time.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I've actually never seen a basketball game in Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
I have been to Madison Square Garden, but that was for the Milrose games.
Oh,
back
right.
in the day.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Very good. Well, that's the Big East bracket. The other thing of note for the Villanova fans out there looking to follow the team through the NCAA tournament is that I have made the definitive declaration that they're going to Pittsburgh for rounds 1 and 2. 100% going to Pittsburgh. And the reason is because they beat Georgetown.
Sharpie. Yeah.
Sharpie, Pittsburgh. Like it. There you go, Seth Davis. Yeah. They don't call Big East games, but that's okay. So, why are they going to Pittsburgh? Well, the other top teams, and let's take a look at the bracketology. And we're going to do, actually, let's look at the top 16. This is a much better way to look at it. Virginia is the number 1 seed. They will go to Charlotte, win or lose in the ACC tournament at any point. Xavier, the 3 seed, they will actually choose Pittsburgh. So Xavier has a chance to jump Villanova, and they would go to Pittsburgh. So now only one more spot because you have 2 pods of 4, right, at any point in one of those regions. Michigan State will go to Detroit if they are afforded the opportunity. Duke will go to Charlotte if they are afforded the opportunity. Gonzaga will be out west in Boise. Michigan or Purdue. Now, it looks to me like it'll be Michigan since they beat Purdue in the Big Ten final. They will go to Detroit. The only way for Villanova to not go to Pittsburgh would have been to somehow fall behind Purdue. Because Purdue, who initially thought they were going to Detroit, next would be Pittsburgh. So, unless Villanova falls from 2 to 10, which I don't see, Villanova will be going to Pittsburgh. The only other thing that could have happened is if both North Carolina and Duke had finished ahead of Villanova, because you could have had Virginia wanting to go to Charlotte, Duke wanting to go to Charlotte, and North Carolina, or flip-flop them, the third team there, wanting to go to either Nashville or Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh is actually, by about an hour, closer to Tobacco Road than it is to Nashville from Tobacco Road, oddly enough. So Sharpie that one up and get your tickets, folks, because Villanova is going to Pittsburgh in the first and hopefully second round of the NCAA tournament.
All right. Sounds good to me. Get ready to make that trip on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, everybody. So I want to get to, that list makes me immediately want to talk about what teams do you guys think have the best and most realistic chances at winning the national championship. I know it's tough to say without the bracket in front of you because matchups are so important. But just looking at it, what teams? National championship teams have typically share characteristics, right? There's some characteristics that pretty much every national championship team has had. One of the UConn teams might be an outlier, but what do you guys think?
Well, I think just about every team other than Villanova that has won the national championship in the last how many ever years has had a top 15 pick. So let's just go into that. Who has a top 15 pick on the roster, right? Villanova does. Michigan State clearly does. Duke does. Kansas. No, those types of teams. I don't know about Purdue. I really liked Purdue and still do like Purdue. I think the health of Vince Edwards is a big factor there. They do everything well, and Carson Edwards can be spectacular. I just wonder a little bit. If they draw the right matchup, they could go all the way to San Antonio and win this thing. But they're kind of like that team that I'm not 100% sure of. Michigan could do it. They're riding a high. They're a very, very good team. I think they might be slightly overranked at 7. Gonzaga, I just don't see this year. Nigel Williams-Goss gone. They've recovered relatively well. I just don't see it from them this year. And it's not just because Villanova blew them out in Madison Square Garden. I'm fully aware that that's a different team. Michigan State, listen, can they do it? Yes. Do I think they will? No. They are not consistent enough for me. They don't play well enough together. But if you do get Miles Bridges going, I think he is taking a few too many outside looks right now. But Jaren Jackson, Nick Ward, the three of them with Bridges slashing to the hoop, Jackson blocking at the hoop or, making things happen with his athleticism, and Nick Ward just taking up space and starting to dominate down low. It's a team that could do it. I just don't really see it. The one team I haven't really hit is Virginia. I think they can do it. Unfortunately, I think they don't put enough teams away, so if they do fall asleep or into a lull for a couple minutes, even though they play great defense, they can get burned, a la Syracuse. So those are kind of my thoughts.
Well, get out your segue. I'm going to take this opportunity to segue into our trivia real quick. Definitely going to get back to this discussion, but you mentioned Michigan, and our trivia question will go into talking more about this. So just take this opportunity, a little pop quiz, maybe get when you guys weren't ready for it, get into our discussion. And why it keys off of Michigan or stems off of Michigan is because Michigan is going to be a hot pick in everybody's bracket and everybody's pool. Your aunt, your uncle, your uncle's friends, brothers, roommates in college is going to pick them in your pool. Everybody's going to be taking Michigan because people like teams that get hot and win their conference tournaments. However, historically, conference championships have not translated into national championships. We all remember Villanova did not win the Big East tournament, lost to Seton Hall in the championship in 2016 when they won the national championship. So my question for you two is, what was the last team to win their conference tournament championship and win the national championship?
I think I might be ready.
10 seconds, or if you're ready, Kev.
I have an answer. Yeah.
All right. Who wants to go first?
Me? All right. I believe the year might be off. It's either 2013 or 2014. I'm going to go with the UConn Huskies.
Okay. That would be 2011. I think something happened a little bit in between there. Unless Shabazz. Did Shabazz win it? I'm going to stick with the trend. The team we talked about last week where it didn't count. Give me the Louisville Cardinals in 2013.
Well, yeah. Yes, Bob. Yes and yes. So the Louisville Cardinals in 2013 were the last, if you think it counts. If you don't think they count, it would be Kemba Walker and the UConn Huskies in 2011. 2014, actually, those two teams in the American Conference Championship game, Louisville beat UConn, and then UConn went on to win the national championship. But yeah, 2011, if you want to, say, I mean,
give it to Kev.
It would be that Kemba Walker in those 11 games.
Don't give me anything. Let's just see how this plays out here.
What do you mean?
Well, let's just see.
I don't know.
What do you mean? It's already played out.
I mean,
there were questions done.
So wait, did they take their national title or no?
Yeah, they vacated.
Yeah, okay, so I win. Thank you.
That's what I said.
So don't give it to
thank you
me.
very much.
Well, you give it what's rightly mine.
Oh, wow.
There you go.
All right. But how about that? I mean, can we just reflect on that 2011 UConn run.
Let's
I mean, they were a 9 seed in the Big East tournament. They had started off the season unranked until they went through and beat Wichita State, Michigan State, and Kentucky on their way to winning the Maui invite. Jumped all the way to 4th in the country, undefeated 12-0 in non-conference, and then all of a sudden they go into Big East play, go 9-9, 9th seed, and then they run through the Big East tournament, winning 5 games in 5 days, beating the likes of number 1 seed Pitt, Syracuse.
Which, by the way, that Pitt game, crossing
Yep.
over one Gary McGee,
That's right.
where Cardiac Kemba
Cardiac
does
Kemba,
it again.
yes, the step
UConn
back.
wins at the buzzer.
That's right.
Sean
And
McDonough.
and then an overtime game against Syracuse, and then Louisville in the championship game. And then they beat another Big East team, Cincinnati, in the second round of the tournament, if I remember correctly. And then that ugly game, beat Kentucky again, as they had done earlier in Maui in the national semifinal in
Yes.
Houston, and then the ugly championship against
Butler.
But what a story!
You
That
remember
team-
that, though? That team should have been out. Well, no, I'm sorry. I actually am thinking about the 14 year, where they won that year. Should have lost in the first round. St. Joe's had them beaten. St. Joe's was the 10 seed. UConn won the game, went and played Villanova in Buffalo.
Oh, right. in
It would have been a
2014.
holy war
Yeah.
in the second round. Then the third round of the NCAA tournament, the second game for Villanova.
Yeah.
So oddly enough,
Yeah, that was 2014. Yeah.
yep,
But,
that was Shabazz.
But yeah, 2011. They had finished the season 4. Well, they'd finished the season 1-4. They'd lost 4 of the last 5 games before going 11 straight to the national
In many
championship.
ways, it had a lot of similarities to what would come a few years later with Michigan. You mentioned that Michigan team. Trey Burke led. They were a top team all year, went in a skid down the stretch, lost to Penn State on the road. Bunch of bad games. They come in, they're a 4 seed, and they went all the way to the final where they lost to the Louisville Cardinals, who continue to come up in our discussions here. So perhaps Trey Burke and co. won the national championship. I wonder if that means that my pool in Tim Brando's show's March Madness pool is now null and void. I don't know, because Louisville lost and vacated their national championship. So I have now never won a nationally syndicated radio show's March Madness pool. It's very unfortunate. Anything
My
for me?
condolences.
Yeah, it is a
sorry.
tough one.
I'll
It's a
pull one
shame.
out later. But what do you
What else we
think?
got?
But what do you think? I mean, so branching off of that, so I mean that Michigan team, everybody's going to jump on the bandwagon. So shout out to my boy Andrew Rutledge. He's a PhD candidate. Good luck to him, by the way. I need to check in how that dissertation is going at
sir.
Michigan, who told me back in November that some old guy in a random Ann Arbor bar had said that nobody should sleep on his Wolverines this basketball season.
And that's the first year, damn it, that he's ever said that, sitting in that same
And
bar.
I said, and so he said, your cats should be warned, have been warned. And I just think about that. I mean, because they were a mediocre team in the non-conference, and then did all right in the Big Ten, but really underperformed given their talent and the returners they had from that Elite Eight team last year or Sweet 16. Did they make the Elite Eight, or was it just the Sweet 16?
To be
And
honest,
the
I
Big
don't
Ten,
remember.
but they won the Big Ten championship, right? And after the horrific play-in incident, right, where their team really came together. But anyway, all the talent they had back in a mediocre season, and then all of a sudden really
Yep.
showed their potential in New York this past weekend. So what are we to make of this? I mean, when I think of a national champion or teams that either do check the boxes or don't check the boxes, are what we should think of. In recent years, people have said that actually you find more often than not that preseason rankings end up being meaningful at the end of the year, that national champions are often teams that were ranked very high in the preseason, and even though they might have underperformed early in the season, by the end figured things out.
That's one of those correlation, not causation. It didn't happen because they were ranked high.
Oh,
They're ranked
right.
high because they have star players.
Yeah, exactly. Right, and then in the one and done era where you have a lot of young teams, that's young teams being ranked based on potential early in the season, who then spend all year figuring things out, and it finally clicks when you get to late February and March. And then the other thing is, that I mentioned that that UConn team for a specific reason, and that's something that is taken really largely into account and given major emphasis, especially in the seeding process, is non-conference schedule and games. So that was a UConn team that had torn through their non-conference schedule on the way to Maui Invitational win and number 4 ranking, and then all of a sudden, you get to the tough old Big East Conference where they really struggle. I mean, obviously they figured it out somehow, in that first week of March, the Big East tournament, and tore through the top teams in the Big East. But so, I mean, is that something? And then obviously when you're getting to the tournament, you're not playing generally teams from your conference. I mean, they met Cincinnati in the second round that year. But so, are you putting weight, when you're playing, so in the non-conference schedule, but you're not going to be playing those teams in the tournament. So how much emphasis do you put on the non-conference? How you did against teams not in your conference?
Are you
Does that
talking about,
matter?
I'm not sure what you're saying, about picking the bracket in RPI, or what's it matter when it gets to the tournament?
I'm saying when it gets to the tournament, I mean, there's some teams that, I mean, based on how competitive your league is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So like a team that might have done really well in the non-conference schedule against teams not in their league, but they're in a really tough league. So then they struggled in that really tough league. They played a lot of close games. Shots just didn't go in. They didn't bounce their way. They come out at like a middle of the pack in their league, but they're still a really good team, and everybody thinks they're struggling. Oh, what's wrong with them? But it's not really something's wrong with them. They're just in a really tough league, and now they're going to be going into the NCAA tournament, where once again they're going to be playing teams not in their top conference, not in their really tough league, and they're going to be better for being in that that tough conference. So I'm saying, are there teams we can think of that either were ranked really high in the season, young teams that we think have finally figured it out? Are there teams that we think people have given up on, but they shouldn't give up on because they are battle tested, they've been in a tough conference, that type of thing? Those are the questions that come to my mind from that trivia question.
I don't know. Miami, they got a lot of talent, middling in the ACC, but no doubt they have a lot of talent, haven't been able to put it together yet. Florida's never really put it together, but they had talent in preseason rankings. They were up high. Goodness, I don't know. I don't see it out of Clemson personally. Arizona as a 3 seed has had a really up and down season, and not just on the floor, but they have a lot of talent.
And they have a lot going on now.
They do.
In their program.
Wichita State is a 5 seed, especially if they're going to be in Virginia. Look at the top right there on your screen. I suppose they could be a tough out. I don't know. Based on the premise you gave me, that's sort of my top of the head thoughts, Kev.
Mm-hmm. Well, these aren't necessarily teams that are given up on at this point, but I would say 2 of the hotter teams right now are both teams in the ACC, and that's Duke and North Carolina. I mean, here's 2 teams that have been there before. You have some upper-class leadership in Grayson Allen and Joel Berry, and you have some real talent, in some of the freshmen that they have on that team. So, with very experienced coaches at those programs, I could see both of those teams making a very deep run, even more so than a Virginia or something like that. You see a lot of these teams that, unless you're Kentucky and you have, the Karl Anthony Towns of the world and Anthony Davises, you're generally not going to win with a full team of freshmen. That just doesn't happen very often. I think you got to look at what type of leadership they have on their teams, and these 2 programs, as well as Villanova, right up there with Jalen Brunson, probably one of the best leadership guys in all of college basketball right now. I think when you get to these tough situations, you look to guys like that, guys who have been there before. Obviously Jalen Brunson and Joel Berry have each won a national championship. So I think I look for those 3 teams to make some noise this year.
There you go. All right. Well, it should be a lot of fun. Big East tournament starts tomorrow. We mentioned the bracket. 7 versus 10, Marquette against DePaul, and then 8-9, Georgetown against St. John's. Winner of that Georgetown-St. John's game gets Xavier. Villanova will take on the winner of DePaul and Marquette. And then, of course, we'll be back next week talking about March Madness. But before we go, we got one last thing, Tom. At least one last thing, but this is a big one.
Yeah, here we go. it's time for our final week results of the Bob Long, Kevin Long Brothers Pick'em Challenge. Cue music. Oh, where is it?
Dun,
Oh,
dun, dun,
no.
dun, 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 dun.
All right,
Hey.
come at me, bro. All right, here we go.
Whoa, who said that?
Hey. All right. Well, coming into the week, Bob was just hanging in there with a 76 to 72 point lead. Remember, 2 of Bob's picks from the prior week were null and void due to some issues with the ESPN app versus the official lines from Vegas and whatnot. So he was picking 2 extra games this week. But let's start with Kevin. Kevin went with Tennessee over Mississippi State, a game which we actually followed and had the results for on last week's show. During our show, Mississippi State was favored by 1.5 points, and the Volunteers crushed the Dogs 76-54, a huge 33.5-point win for Kevo in that SEC battle. Another SEC battle, a team that Kevin went with all year long. Auburn, War Eagle, over Arkansas. Arkansas, a 2-point favorite. Actually, this one did not go Kevo's way as Arkansas
I like
won
this new nickname.
92-82.
What just happened?
A negative 7 points. We're live. This is live.
Live TV.
Live
is a
entertainment here,
hell of a
folks.
drug.
Live.
And then his Big East game for the week actually ended up being really important in terms of who Villanova ended up getting and not getting on their side of the bracket. St. John's over Butler was his pick. Butler, a 2-point favorite. And the Johnnies, 75-68 win, plus 19 points for Kevin. As I said, big implications for Villanova as well. That's why St. John's is not on their side of the bracket. They have DePaul instead, but that's why Butler is on their side of the bracket if both teams make it to the semifinal. So, Kevin ends with 45.5 points for the week. 117.5 points. That's a great number. Clap it up for Kev to end the season.
We
well
have absolutely
done.
no benchmark for how this game should go or the number
But
of
we
points,
do-
but it's a heck of a number.
Yes, but we do know that you guys, that's got to be a record.
Oh, it's
But
got-
you guys,
Hey,
we
I have
do
a hockey
know-
record.
we do know that you guys were in the negatives, just probably like a month ago, right? And then all of a sudden figured
figured
it
it
out.
out.
Yeah,
We figured it out.
you
Don't pick
found
favorites.
the flaws in the you guys
Scoring
we found the
system.
flaws. You guys would be good tax layers. All right, here we go. Loopholes in the system.
Hey,
Well,
no more
Bob,
of that, man. They just passed
so,
that.
so I'm going to go first with Bob's Big East pick for the week. So, Bob, Seton Hall over Villanova, picking against our Cats, man. Well, he said he expected Seton Hall to cover, not necessarily win, and he was correct. Our Wildcats were a 7-point favorite and won by just 1 in that ugly overtime matchup. Old Big East brawl, as they said, up in Newark, 69-68.
Well, we'll talk about what could have happened there. But
All right, let's talk about it. I can't wait. A little plug for later in the show. So 6 points for Bob in that matchup to our Cats' demise. And then he went to the SEC, Florida over Bama, who was a 1.5-point favorite. Florida, huge win for Bob in this game. The
an
Gators,
NCAA tournament for them,
yeah,
by
implications,
the way.
exactly.
They're in now.
73, that's Sharpie. 73-52, 33.5 points for Bob in that game. And then he went to the Big Ten tournament, first round, Iowa against Illinois. He picked Iowa to cover a 1-point, or not cover, I guess you had to beat a 1-point spread in favor of Illinois. And Iowa did just that, winning 96-87, plus 20 points for Bob. So all those games were wins for Bob. Looking great. He came into the week with a lead. What would happen? He tried to get cute on us
I did.
and went to
I
the
did that.
MAC.
I
He
did
went to the MAC.
Not once.
And not once, but twice. He went back for seconds. And would it pay off? Let's find out. Bowling Green over Ohio.
Good, solid team.
Not Ohio State, Ohio.
Bobcats.
4.5-point favorite was Ohio.
Taylor
Bob
Tuttle.
went with Bowling Green. Did we recall what the nickname is for Bowling Green?
Falcons.
Falcons. That's right. Falcons, I believe.
Against the
I believe
Bobcats.
a wise man said that. Before the show.
Taylor, Tettleman, and Bo Blankenship.
Yeah. So would the
Of-
Falcons come in clutch for Bob?
Would have been timely. No doubt.
Ohio won 75-59, negative 11.5 points for Bob. But he was still in it. He stayed in the MAC. He went double dipping. Ball State, Central Michigan. Central Michigan, a 1-point favorite. That's a favorable pick for Bob. You get major points out of that game. Close spread and all. Ball State, top half of that MAC league. I believe they're the 4th seed in their tournament currently. Kev, do you want to take the honors of announcing the? No, that's all right. Central Michigan won 75-51. Negative 23 points for Bob. The MAC
Hurts.
Wow.
Hurts.
The MAC does it to Bob. Yeah. He's plus 25 for the week. You might have thought that would have been enough to win it. It was not. Over 100 points. Triple digits. Would that have been enough to win it? No.
Again,
101. 101. I know. I mean, they've been saying for years historically that 100-point benchmark
in
the Long Brothers Pick'em Challenge is the number to get to. Well, you both got to it, but Kevin wins. Kevin, do we know what the punishment is going to be? Will Bob have to go streaking tomorrow night in Madison Square Garden? Those first round games of the Big East tournament, nobody shows up. I mean, so they need some entertainment, right? Maybe it would be during the DePaul Marquette matchup.
That wouldn't be too big of a deal, I don't think, right?
No problems, no legal implications.
Nah, see, we won't do that. We won't do that. So in honor of the NFL Combine recently, and we, potentially have a snow day. I actually just found out I have off from work, so I'll be here. Hopefully Bob will be here as well.
Because
I would like Bob to run through some NFL Combine drills tomorrow in the snow. Saquon Barkley
will be filmed.
One of our favorite guys here. Documented. All of us had a great Combine. In honor of that, I would like to see Bob run through some drills. I won't make him do the 225-pound bench press, but we'll have him run some 40s and catching some balls out there, making some cuts.
Nice.
And all be on film for next week's show, hopefully.
Wow, that's great. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the opportunity.
Yes. I'm wow. He didn't even try to act. He didn't even say, "Oh, dang it, man. That's terrible."
Listen, listen, I'm excited for the opportunity. Everything I've been able to accomplish so far is because of my teammates here, and I would be fortunate to be drafted by any team. And I promise to make that city a home for myself and my family, and I'm just committed to be the best I can be and getting better every single day and making that franchise better every single day. So I look forward to the opportunity.
Do you think you can be the guy to turn around the Cleveland Browns? Would you say that?
Listen, turn around, right? I'm just trying to go in there and work hard every day, and I like to think that my best will be able to make a difference in this league. But it starts from the bottom up, and I'm excited to take that journey.
Are you clutch?
No, I'm not.
All right.
I'm also not a choker.
Pass.
You're perfect for the Browns. All right. Well,
yeah, you know what? They don't have any timely situations that they need anything.
Oh, right. So, exactly. There you go. Perfect. You and Saquon teaming up in Cleveland. All right. Good for you guys. So I wanted to say, Rob Deneau, thanks for checking in. DePaul is in Chicago, in case you were wondering, folks out there. Actually,
Wintrust
used to be a powerhouse,
respectable,
and you would think they'd still be better. I mean, Chicago is a pretty phenomenal basketball city, so kind of head scratcher there why DePaul isn't better.
Everybody's heading up to Welsh Ryan Arena to go play for Chris Collins and the Wildcats of Northwestern. And
who knows?
Going to Michigan State and Purdue and Michigan.
And Notre Dame and
Kansas.
What happened in Kansas and Gonzaga and Texas
and Duke, and the list goes on. Anywhere but DePaul, apparently.
Yeah. But, nice new arena, though. Very nice new arena.
And we hope the best for their program, because it'd be great to have. Always want the Big East programs to perform well. You know what I'm saying? So.
Yes, sir.
So yeah. So anything? There was a comment that you wanted to. What was the comment I made that you wanted to get to during the pick'em?
I'm not sure. I'm not really sure what it was.
Oh, somebody replay the tape. Go to the.
There you go.
Go to the monitor.
We also got a comment asking if our team's going to be out in Pittsburgh for the first round or second round of the NCAA tournament. I will be out there on Saturday, most likely, barring an upset of any kind in the first round. So I will, knock wood, be there in Pittsburgh on Saturday for the second round games, which most likely will be a 1 seed against an 8 or a 9 seed, and another 1 seed against an 8 or a 9 seed. Xavier and Villanova, in some order, I think, should be in Pittsburgh. And I think they both have a really good shot to be 1 seeds. I mean, we'll take one more look here at this top 25. How far can Villanova truly drop, even with a first-round loss? In theory, they could, I think, drop to the 5 line if the committee would put them behind Michigan State. Maybe a first-round loss could send them behind Duke. I don't think Gonzaga can jump them. Michigan, Cincinnati, Kansas, I don't think any of those teams can jump. Maybe Kansas if they're going strictly on brand name alone without realizing they've lost 7 games. But I think that's about it. So Villanova could be maybe a top 2 seed. And perhaps, any way you slice it, I could see Villanova and Duke as the 1-2 seed in any order in the East region. That could be interesting.
Yeah, I think regardless of what happens this weekend, I think Villanova is a lock for a top 2 seed.
Top 2 seed, no doubt. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Even top, even a 1 seed, Michigan State or Duke or Xavier has to make a statement in their tournament.
Well, Michigan State's already done.
Oh, right.
Yeah, they're done playing.
That's right.
But they've been already re-ranked after that, and they're number 4.
Sure. Yeah. So Duke would need to make a statement in their tournament.
Yep.
Right. Obviously a tough conference. Virginia and North Carolina. So.
And Virginia can't fall off the 1 line, even with a first-round loss.
Right. Exactly. And so not all hope is lost for Nova, even if it's an early exit to a Marquette or a Butler.
But if Virginia loses and Villanova wins, Villanova could very well be, again, for the second year in a row, the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament.
Definitely. Yeah, I don't think there's much to lose this week. I mean, obviously, you want to win the Big East Tournament Championship, of course, and I'm sure they'll have a bit of a chip on their shoulder after losing their first new Big East regular season title to Xavier. But I think there's nothing to lose and only opportunity to gain this weekend for the Cats, which is a great situation to be in, and it's the first time they'll be going up to New York in the new Big East, being the hunter instead of the hunted. Yes. So I'm excited to see how they play in that role.
Anything else, boys, tonight? Other than getting ready for my combine workout in feet of snow here in Philadelphia as my punishment for losing.
Get excited. All right.
I can't wait. Can't wait to throw you some passes.
Well, I would just say, is there any team that comes to your mind? I mean, we went on about that 2011 UConn team that made that run. Is there any team? And we've talked about in recent years, it sort of has been chalk. The teams that have won the national championship outside of the 2014 Connecticut team. Is there any team that you could see going into the conference tournament week catching fire, or do you think that Michigan team can carry their momentum into the NCAA tournament? Is there
I really
a team
don't. I don't see
think outside of the top 8 teams that we've really talked about having a realistic shot at the championship. Is there a team that you think could sneak in there?
I don't know. Not really. I mentioned some of the teams. Miami has talent. Florida has talent. I think Louisville's playing pretty well if they were to get a matchup against Purdue. But no, nobody really sticks out.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say so either. A team like Kentucky who's been up and down all year, you just never know with them. They have a lot of highly recruited, high school basketball players, obviously. A lot of talent on that team. Maybe if they pull it together in the SEC tournament, they get hot. You just never know with a team like that. But, nobody that necessarily sticks out to me either.
Well, how about this? Is there one team that has impressed you with how they've been playing of late in particular, and you think is, going in the right direction at the right time, and you think has, could be the team in the tournament? Because I have a team for sure.
Go for it. Let's hear it.
The Duke Blue Devils, and the reason is defense. They have gotten so much better on the defensive end. I know they lost last week, but they've gotten so much better on the defensive end. Beat North Carolina this weekend. I think that has been that was their Achilles heel all season. All of a sudden, they're in the top 10 in defensive efficiency in the country, sort of out of nowhere. This has been a recent development over the past few weeks. They've all of a sudden figured it out. They have the seniors in Grayson Allen. They have the leadership. They have the talent. People have been saying all year that if Duke wants it, It's theirs to take, and I think they've been really impressive recently, and it's scary. I mean, because I think that was the one thing that I always look to. Oh, well, Duke doesn't have a shot this year because they don't play any defense, and they're too young. Well, they figured it out. Look out for the Blue Devils.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they could be a number 1 seed. So, yeah, I would say that they have a good shot for sure.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing better.
Well, I'm saying they're the team that's impressed me the most recently in the direction that they're heading.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's fair.
I mean, I alluded to North Carolina earlier. Another team right up there in that discussion is Kansas. They, we weren't sure if they were going to repeat again as Big 12 champions, and they just showed how strong they are, how deep they are. They're, playing in the toughest conference, arguably in the country this year, and they've showed that they're still kings of the Big 12. I think when you prove yourself against some of the top talent in the nation, they're probably one of the most battle-tested teams coming into the tournament. So I'd like them to potentially make some noise coming up here.
I was going to toss Arizona in there, but just for fun, I'll go with a team that isn't, we'll say, a top 6 program in college basketball history, just to do something a little bit different. I'd be interested to see what Cincinnati does in the NCAA tournament.
Definitely.
It's a good team, like Mick a lot, good coach, Mick Cronin. They don't score a lot of points, but also they extend possessions. If you look at teams in terms of where they shoot it on average with how much time left on the shot clock, Cincinnati is one of those teams that has the longest possessions of any team in the country, and they also play some great defense. They have been battle-tested this year in that they've played 2 big-time games against Wichita State, and they will likely play them again in the tournament, in the American Athletic Tournament. I think that's a decent team that is going to be overlooked. So it's not what you asked, but I thought it was worth saying.
No, I agree. If there's one team that I would definitely need to do more research on before I fill out my bracket, even before I see what the bracket looks like, I know it would be Cincinnati. They're a team that has very quietly been sitting in the top 10 all year without the attention, and that's even though they were in probably one of, if not the most exciting conference races in the country with Wichita State all year long, and then, shockingly knocked off the Shockers to win the American this year. And so they're a team that I really haven't gotten to see play much. They haven't gotten much publicity at all, even though they've been hovering around the top 5 all season long. A team I'm very curious about and would need to definitely look into more before I decide how far I would expect them to go in the tournament.
All right, well, this was a great show. It went a little bit long, but if I may say, clutch performances by the both of you tonight. It really was a good time.
I haven't seen enough of a sample size yet. I can't comment.
Yeah, well, I tell you,
I
you
just
can go
wish
back.
I was as good of a putter
Absolutely.
as I am.
Hey, I wish I was a better putter than I am,
Yeah.
because then I would score better, and people would say, "Hey, that Bob guy is clutch." I just wish.
I don't think we're golfing in too many clutch moments, the 3 of us.
Sure we are. Ruff's Annual Golf Classic. It's an all-time legend. If you don't know about it, then look it up. It's spectacular. Guys, this was fun. I enjoyed it. I am going to rest up and get ready for my punishment, which is tomorrow in multiple feet of snow, perhaps. Running 40-yard dashes, catching footballs, and maybe doing a broad jump and a high jump. Oh, the broad jump's going to be great. The high jump is, can I get from the ground out of the crest of the snow?
Yeah, we'll measure it by how high your foot mark is in the snow.
There
See
you
if
go.
you can get out.
Deal. I don't know how that it doesn't make
I don't know if that's
We'll
gonna
go with
make
it.
A whole lot of
We're
sense.
excited.
Just go with it.
Hope you are as well. We'll have the video live on next week's show as we also preview the NCAA tournament. March is here, folks. Get excited for it. I know we are, and thanks for hanging on with us tonight. So for Tom Trainer and for Kevin Long, the victor of the Long Brothers Pick'em Challenge, my name's Bob Long saying so long. All these broadcasts are up on YouTube after, and hope that you can go back. If you didn't catch the clutch discussion, put away some time and check it out. It was a lot of fun, and like I said, worth the time of those who are interested in the subject. So we'll see everybody next week. Thanks again for being here, and this is the Villanova Basketball Report live here on BLS.